We start at the first noticed feature, Riccia fluitans, a thick, green, and luscious plant, itself holding other plants. Despite it looking quite unassuming but beautiful, it's extremely important in the tank's ecosystem, at least in this one. If we take a look closer onto the surface of the Riccia fluitans, we can see small snails trudging along the surface, looking for detritus and other dead plant materials. Though this snail seems like he's unimportant in the large field, he's quite important and can cover nearly the entire field of Riccia fluitans in a single day, eating whatever he can, whenever he can. We see the importance that Riccia fluitans plays in the tank when we look to the left of the Riccia fluitans patch. A small fry of Pelagic is hiding in this patch. He's looking for food and for shrimp to hunt. He's taking quite a risk by going to this small patch. He will be eaten by anything and everything. But the rewards are worth the risk. Soon he will be too big and he will leave the patch forever, never to return unless hunting. If we look at the bottom of the Riccia fluitans, it's bright and it's green and it's full of small baby shrimp and other food particles. We can see a red shrimp, otherwise known as a cherry shrimp, and a snail below it. If you look to the top right of your screen, there's also a Pelagic fry. He lives in the patch as well, and he's also looking for food right now, since there's been a recent feeding. The bottom of the patch is also filled with life, just as the top is. Though it doesn't look like it is filled with life from the top, it's quite unassuming. Riccia fluitans is probably one of the most amazing plants, being highly oxygenating and beautiful. Starting from the top down in this documentary, as I look in the back I see a group of Pelagic. I see this quite often and I only see it mainly when they're looking for food and something has piqued their interest. They're very smart fish and they're very intelligent hunters. They eat most of my shrimp babies, even though some still do get through. What they're doing right now is I believe they're congregating and they're eating, as you see the big one spit something out. But I'm not quite sure because there's no food being fed at the current moment. The second most abundant fish in the tank, well, is the molly. Its fry are nearly the size of the adult Pelagic fish, and it's quite large. These molly are not fry. Even though they're smaller than the big black one, they still are not babies. They're quite young, but they're teens. They're only about 4 or 5 months old. These I would consider the pelagic swimming fish of the tank. They're active and they're lively all throughout the day, and if you turn on the lights basically any time, they'll wake up and try to see what's going on. They're constantly hungry and they're really cute. They're probably my favorite. Once we start looking at the somewhat pelagic region of the tank, we start to see snails that would be considered pests, but they're actually quite good. They eat detritus and dead plant material, and there's life basically everywhere throughout the tank, even where you'd least expect it. On the barren right side of the tank, on the glass, there is what is called a zebra snail, feeding off the tank, and it's eating whatever algae, or detritus, or fish scum it could get. In this clip, we can see a shrimp swimming across the tank. It's not well known that shrimp can swim. Well, they can, but it's just really difficult for them. They lack a lot of omnidirectional control. This is a cherry shrimp, a showstopper. Even though people think as shrimp as being stupid, they're quite intelligent in that these shrimp also know when the fish are being fed. They will swim up to the surface and wait for food. It's quite difficult for them to grab food, so they often get knocked around. But at least they try, and I can say that's a lot for a lot of people. Though from the top it looks very unassuming, feeding time is quite a chaotic time in the tank. Nearly all the fish in the tank gather around to eat as much food as possible. I feed only once a day, but I feed 3 different types of proteins. Basically every fish that is capable of swimming will try to eat, even the bottom feeders. In fact, even the shrimp will. There's a shrimp in the background, which I will zoom on in closely in just one moment. And you can see he's trying to get fish flakes from the roof of the fish tank. He's failing because he lacks the control. As I said, they're pretty bad at swimming, though he's trying as hard as he can. He gives up and just goes to a flower eventually. Near the bottom of the fish tank, it's a lot less chaotic. This is of course after feeding time, but still, a lot of least-killies like to hang out at the bottom, mostly the small ones that are just young juveniles, but not fry. They seem to like to head over here just to hunt for shrimp and other small particles of food. This seems to be where they get their best luck in getting food, and it's where they'll spend the majority of their juvenile lives. Even though they'll go to the top, they seem to greatly enjoy eating from the bottom. The bottom is made of fluval stratum, and it's my favorite substrate. Though everything in this tank seems pretty natural, this isn't. This is some embroidery, I think, stitch that I put on the bottom, and this specific shrimp likes to eat off it all the time. It doesn't look natural in the tank, and it's mainly for them to eat off and for the Rickia fluitans to stay tied down so that they can have babies that will survive to adulthood. He's about to get scared in 1 second. And boom. My shrimp, for some reason, always want to swim to the top, and I could never understand that because there's a patch of Rickia flutans on the bottom. They do seem to enjoy it much more and have most of their babies hatch near here, but they still seem to enjoy the Rickia flutans on the top. Either way, I think this is probably the best addition onto the tank, even though it doesn't look good in my opinion. To feed the bottom feeders, I drop a shrimp pellet in the bottom. Even though a lot of people say not to do this, I do it anyway, and the fish don't seem to really predate on the shrimp just because they're shrimp. The cory cats and the mollies love this, but the mollies especially love this. It's their favorite food. They can't get enough of the shrimp. Even though it's meant for the cories, really, they will eat it. The cories, they'll get some, and that's all that really matters. I just want the cories to be fed and happy. I call them the pups because they remind me of puppies and dogs. They're really cute. The cory cats struggle to swim against the current in the tank. They don't feed from the top, and they're bottom feeders, and they're trying to get fish flakes that are on the top. They're not going to be very successful with it, but they're doing a pretty good job at getting whatever they can. I think that's quite cool how they'll just go up and down despite not being a surface feeding fish, and they attempt to get food just like all the other fish. It shows you that fish aren't as dumb as you probably think. They're pretty smart. They're pretty intelligent. You can see a shrimp in the back of the tank eating off this leaf. This leaf is creating detritus, and detritus is basically dead or dying, decaying matter of any sort. He's currently grooming himself and eating off of it. I don't really know what he's doing, but leaves are extremely good for shrimp. They're good for their digestion, and they're a good meal. So he's having quite a good time in the back there. What ceases to amaze me about Rickia fluitans is its broad ability to grow plants inside it, as if it's soil or some type of root structure that plants are able to entangle themselves in. That's a blown off power head. What you're currently going to look at is a bit of pearlweed, Monte Carlo, and baby tears all clumped together inside the Riccia fluitans, and they're not killing it, which is amazing to me. Some shrimp choose to work smarter, not harder. You can see a shrimp here feeding off the powerhead intake filter. This has lots of decaying plant material, fish poop, and fish food. This shrimp is getting its fill quite easily. Here in Florida, we have a pest plant, or what's considered a pest plant, called the dollarweed. It's actually quite good for the tank, and it's very common. Not all the plants in a planted tank are exotic or expensive or rare. Not all floating plants are Riccia fluitans. In fact, this is just Rotala floating on the top with a snail and a shrimp on it. A plant purling out of the stem. Normally this would happen throughout the leaves naturally, but I cut the plant recently, so it's taken a while to heal. This happens when the plant's getting enough nutrients and getting enough light to create oxygen in the water. Usually it takes a lot of materials to make this one thing happen. On the bottom of this leaf you can see some bubbles, and that's mostly CO2 and oxygen, but a lot of it's oxygen, and that's just a big accomplishment for a lot of aquatic plant keepers or aquascape artists, is seeing your plants purl and create a lot of oxygen. It's just amazing. Overall, throughout the day, the tank is pretty interesting and it's pretty lively. There's lots of plants purling, there's lots of fish eating and doing their own thing, and there's a lot more activity than you'd probably think. But what happens at night? Some scavengers' work never stops. The shrimp and the snails are still working constantly to clean the tank and scavenge for food, while all the other fish in the tank have basically started to sleep. The cory cats stay near the bottom at night. They're somewhat nocturnal and they'll eat at night and they'll scavenge at night just fine. You can barely see them in these shots, but they're there. I kind of woke the fish up, and the fish were actually asleep. And fish do sleep, but they sleep with their eyes open. They were pretty lethargic and tired. A lot of the plants in the tank, when sunlight goes away or any type of light goes away, they'll start to close up near the top. And I call the tops flowers, even though that's not the right terms, but I think it's really cool how they adapt to the amount of light so quickly. They'll do this in less than 30 minutes, which is amazing. I really hope from this video that you learned something. I want you to remember that you're putting living creatures in boxes, and you need to take care of them. These are creatures that can't self-regulate, and everything has to be taken care of them. Fish are animals that aren't for teaching death to children. They're living, breathing creatures, and they're smart. I believe that we really should start taking care of fish better, and there should be new laws to protect these beautiful creatures. And as an aquascape artist, my goal isn't to exactly recreate nature, but it's to make it look as beautiful as possible and get as close to nature. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and comment.